The thing about winning the rat race is you're still a rat. So, we're studying our spiritual values, and we're looking at expanded horizons, expanding our horizons through being, as we talked about last week, having that beginner's mind, not being so full of our knowledge that we're not open to something new. And the book we're reading is Daring Greatly by Brené Brown. And she is talking a lot about the experience that everyone has of shame and how it really inhibits our lives. And so what we're working with, the quality that we're working with is truth and authenticity. And when we're working with truth and authenticity, what we have to remember is that what we do is we connect with that truth that is within us. And our realization, our job is to bring that truth into the world, to bring that truth out into the world, so that the world becomes heaven. I noticed that there is Anita Murjani is coming to the Harris Center on April 1st. She is the young Indian woman who had an experience of dying and being in that other realm and coming back. And she has a new book, I guess, called What If This Is Heaven? What if this is heaven? There's a thought. What if this is heaven? And we've just been mucking it up. Because when you look outside and you see the beautiful blooms and the trees in bloom, you know, the white and the pink blossoms and the wonderful daffodils coming up and all the little nubs of leaves coming out, and you think, wow, beautiful, magnificent. And as I said last week, you know, beauty is my savior. Whenever I get down into the dumps and I look like, then I look for beauty, and that lifts me. That restores me, that renews me, that refreshes me. So, in one of my classes in ministerial school, they talked about Jesus and his savior role. They called it soteriological. And that meant bringer of wholeness. That's what a savior is a bringer of wholeness, is a person who realizes that wholeness and allows us to realize it too. You know, when people go to gurus, what they talk about is the feeling of the unconditional love. People go and hug Amma because they feel that unconditional love, or they go to see the guru, and the guru emanates this feeling of unconditional love, and that's so not what we usually experience, that it's unique. But what if everybody was emanating unconditional love all the time? That would be an experiment, wouldn't it? That would be a wonderful way to begin something new, something expansive for all of us. So in Brené Brown's book, there's a couple of things she asks us to do, and the first thing is to tell the truth. What she says is, owning our own story and loving ourselves through that process is the bravest thing we will ever do. Owning our own story and loving ourselves through that process is the bravest thing we will ever do. Really just saying, here's what happened, and here I am. Ta-da! Here I am. Because to tell our own story is to tell the truth about who we are. And what she says is to be vulnerable is to be courageous. We think of vulnerability as weakness. But she says being vulnerable is one of the most courageous things we can do. To just be open. To say I love you first. And risk everything. That takes courage. That takes courage. So, what we're doing is we're reconciling our human nature with our divine nature. We're trying to integrate those and reconcile those two parts of ourselves. Ernest Holmes says, "Let each resolve to be true to himself, true to his inner light, true to the truth as he understands it. When every man learns to speak the truth, a complete salvation will come to the world." But what I also think is that you speak your truth, and then I speak my truth, and we find out if there is a truth, if we meet, if those truths are true. What are those truths? Because the truths that we're talking about are those spiritual values, are those truths of beauty and peace and joy and wholeness. And maybe what brings you joy is a NASCAR race. And maybe what brings you joy is, a book reading, and that's fine. We find our joy, and we don't have to force our joy on anybody else. We each get to experience our joy. But we've been told stories about what we're supposed to be doing and supposed to be having, right? She says, this is Brené Brown again, "You better be able to tell the truth about who you are and where you come from and what you're up against, and like yourself in the process of telling that truth, because our sense of worthiness lives inside that story." Our sense of worthiness lives inside that story. And she talked last week about wholeheartedness, about the love and connection that comes from living a wholehearted life. So she says to challenge, to live our truth is we have to challenge the scripts that we've been given. Good little boys and girls don't behave this way. Success equates to money, title, achievements. Well-behaved means to censor certain feelings. And vulnerability is weakness. And crisis of faith is unacceptable because one should have a constant knowing and a steady stream of manifestation. Maybe not. Maybe not. And for some people, illness is weakness. We feel like we don't want to tell people that we're sick because that means we're not manifesting, right? What's in our consciousness? That's the worst question you could ever ask someone. Because, honey, we are living in a soup of consciousness. Oh, it's flu season. Let's all get the flu because Big Pharma wants to sell us all kinds of drugs. It's like, no. We don't have to have a season for being ill. And we seem to go through seasons of being ill. Oh, now it's, allergy season, and then we'll go into cold season. It's like, I don't live in those seasons. I don't want to live in those seasons, but sometimes I do. I get caught up in it because I'm in that soupy consciousness too. So I have to forgive myself and move on. Take the emergency and get on with it. So we have to get over all of these stories. And what she talks about is shame. She says, shame, she says, without an awareness of our inherent wholeness, without the guidance and skill to see ourselves compassionately, we become mired in shame. Now, the thing about shame is that there are 3 universal truths about shame. We all have it. We're afraid to talk about it, and the less we talk about it, the more control it has over our lives. So we all have it, we're afraid to talk about it, and the less we talk about it, the more control it has over our lives. So she talks about the differences. The webs and boxes of the title of this talk refers to the difference between the way women and men experience shame. So with women, the shame comes from this web where it says, be perfect, but don't make a fuss about it. So you're sort of stuck on the web. Be perfect, but don't make a fuss about it. And if you're really good, perfection will come easy. I don't think so. Okay, say what's on your mind, but don't hurt anyone's feelings. Stuck on the web. Okay, just be yourself, but not if it means you're unsure or shy. We like confidence. Don't be too emotional, but don't be too detached. We're stuck on the web. One of the big ones is, be a perfect mother. To be the perfect mother. That's like the first thing about women is their appearance. They're caught up in shame about their appearance. I'm too fat, I'm too thin, I'm too tall, I'm too small. Whatever it is, that's a thing for women. The next thing is your motherhood. And you don't even have to have kids, because if you don't have kids, well, why don't you? What's wrong with you? Right? So motherhood, is another thing. The top 2 things that people have as their shame issues as women. When she did her TED Talk, when Brené Brown did her TED Talk, she had a lot of feedback, of course, and they showed it on the local TV station. She got a lot of emails about that, and some of the feedback was, how can she talk about worthiness when she clearly needs to lose 15 pounds? Another one was, less research, more Botox. And she talked about having a breakdown, which her therapist called a spiritual awakening. But she had a breakdown because she didn't want to talk about feelings. She was into research and numbers and controlling and quantifying everything, proving everything through metrics. And she couldn't deal with feelings. And then when she had to deal with feelings, the volcano erupted. And so she had what she called a breakdown and what her therapist called a spiritual awakening. Well, some people said, good mothers don't fall apart. Good mothers don't fall apart. So they went for her appearance and they went for her mothering. 2 kill shots right there in the shame department. So that's women. Webs, the web. Men, it's boxes. They get put into boxes. So one man, she'd been researching primarily women, in fact, exclusively women. And then a man came up to her after one of her talks and book signings, and he said, what does your research on men show? And she said, well, I haven't really done any. He said, well, that's convenient. He said, we do have shame. He says, and women say they want us to be vulnerable, but when we are, It causes a veritable shitstorm, as he put it. So, and he said, and it's not the coaches, and it's not the leaders of men who are doing this. It's these women that I love who don't want me to get off that white horse. So she began to do research with men. And what she found was the big shamers for men are failure. At work, football, in marriage, with money, with children. Failure is the top shamer for men. Being wrong. And being soft, weak, and fearful. Being soft, weak, and fearful. So there was a story of a young man who, he was a boy, and he loved to draw. He loved to paint and draw, and he knew that in his life, the thing that would make him the happiest is to paint and to draw all his life. And so his mom, like most moms, had his drawings on the fridge. And he was in the kitchen with his uncle and his dad when his uncle said, "What, you're raising a faggot artist now?" After he said that, his father forbade him from taking any other art classes. And his mother, who had been very supportive of his talent, agreed and said that it was probably too girly. He never drew another picture. So that is not just a tragedy for him, it's a tragedy for us, for all the people who would ever have seen those pictures. Then there was another story about a young man who was on the freshman year. He got selected for the freshman football team. Now, he had played football, on the street with his friends and all that kind of stuff, but he'd never been suited up before with all the padding and all that kind of stuff. So there he is, he's all suited up, and he's on the line, and he realizes, oh my God, these guys are going to try to kill me. and so he gets an expression on his face of fear. And of course, what does the coach say? The coach comes up, sees the fear, and says, "Don't be a pussy, get on the line." He said, in that moment, he became aware of what it means to be a man. I'm not allowed to be afraid. I'm not allowed to show fear. I'm not allowed to be vulnerable. Shame is being afraid, showing fear, and being vulnerable. So his reaction was to turn his fear into rage and plow over that other guy and steamroll over that guy. And for the next 20 years, he steamrolled over his wife and his coworkers and his kids. That was his shame reaction. That was his world. We're all hardwired for connection, for love and belonging. Shame is the fear of disconnection. Shame is the fear of disconnection. Brené Brown relates these fear things, these things that we have, this shame that we have, to gremlins. Do you remember the movie Gremlins way back in 1984? This movie came out, and there were these little beings, and they lived in the dark, and they reveled in destruction. They reveled in destroying things, in creating havoc. And she said, they died by exposing them to the light. And the same thing is true for shame. So she has strategies for what she calls shame resiliency. So we have these shame tapes. That's her gremlins. The shame tapes are when we have these things like, she's a writer, right? So she's sitting there and she's got writer's block, and she's thinking, real writers don't do this. Real writers don't have dangling participles. Real writers, don't struggle like this. My writing sucks. Those are her gremlins. So what she has to do is fight those gremlins. And how she does it is, first of all, she recognizes that it's a shamer. Awareness is always the first step in healing anything. So you become aware of, oh, there it is. There it is, that shame thing again. She actually had an experience where she had refused to take a meeting, do a speaking engagement, because she said for her, wholehearted living means that she doesn't go to places when she's got family things. Family comes first. So she had a family birthday, so she didn't want to go to this guy's presentation. So he wrote her this big letter and made big personal attacks on her and, was really nasty about it. And so she got upset. So she decided to forward it to her husband, and she wrote this email to her husband. She forwarded his email and then added her 2 cents, which included the word horseshit twice. And she accidentally hit reply instead of forward. Ever done that? Oh my God. So she replies, and it's like, oh my God, no, stop, and there's nothing you can do. It's on its way. So what happens? She gets an immediate reply from him saying, I knew you were a terrible person, and you suck, And so she just felt so bad. So the first thing is you recognize it. And a friend of hers told her, when you have this experience where the shamers come up, when those gremlins attack, her mantra is to recognize what she's feeling. Pain, 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 pain. Just say pain, 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 pain. It's like somehow it discharges the immediate energy of that. So she said that. Then she says, check in with the messages that are driving the shame. You really want people to like you, right? So the shamer is, you have done something that's really unlikable, and, this guy is definitely not going to like you. So, are these expectations that we're having of ourselves, are they realistic? Are they attainable? Are we trying to be perfect, perfect, perfect all the time? It's so exhausting. And then reaching out. So she reached out to her husband and her best friend, told them what happened, and, they just, said, oh yeah, I hate when that happens, and they just helped her to work her way through it. So we have to reach out to people that we find that we know are trustworthy. And so we have to speak about our shame, and we have to acknowledge it and ask for what we need. We have to acknowledge what we're feeling, and we have to ask for what we need. We have to have good friends. We have to have people who support us. When her daughter was in the 3rd grade, she told, they were at recess, and she told one of her little girlfriends something that had happened earlier that was sort of embarrassing. Well, the little girl immediately ran over and told all these other little girls, and then they all laughed at her. And they were so upset, so involved with this laughing at her. When they came back into the room, they were still laughing at her. And so the teacher told them to chill. And she also had a big jar on her desk. And the jar on her desk was full of marbles, or had marbles in it. And so what she would do, she took some marbles out of the jar. Now the thing about this jar is, every time the kids were doing something good and doing something wonderful and being creative and inventive and helping each other and doing good things, she would put marbles in the jar. And when they did things that were like this, shaming somebody else, she took the marbles out of the jar. So the little girl, when she came home and told her mom what happened, Brené Brown said, you have to remember to tell the friends that put marbles into your jar, that keep your secrets, that support you when you need it. And every time anybody does that, it's adding to that jar, that marble jar. And so those are the people that you can trust, the people who have a lot of marbles in their jar from all of the activities that they have helped you with, right? So we have to remember that those are the people that we can talk to about things that we feel uncomfortable about or that we feel ashamed of or embarrassed about, so that we can get that connection, restore that reconnection with ourselves and be reminded of who we are. This is what practitioners are for, is to remind us of who we are, to remind us of how beautiful we are. Because of a willingness to disengage from the web or climb out of the box, our story elevates into a narrative of wholeheartedness, authenticity, love, and belonging. Authenticity, love, and belonging. And I love this prayer by a Benedictine nun named Macrina Wiederker. Oh God, help me to believe the truth about myself, no matter how beautiful it is. Oh God, help me to believe the truth about myself, no matter how beautiful it is. So our affirmation for this week is, I am enough and my life matters. 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 And so it is.